Welcome to the Tilehurst podcast number 347. After a difficult weekend, we've got a few things to talk about and a few things to say. Really, whilst the result was a negative one, we're here to try and give as balanced view as possible. And joining me, as always, in the hot seat across the pond is Ross Webber. How are you, mate?
Doing good. We've got that either side of the pond balance, so hopefully we can bring some of that balance to our coverage of a weird week for Reading.
Yeah, it's been a very strange week, actually, hasn't it? And the week is only, or the season's only 2 weeks old. So yeah, we'll go through it as we go through the podcast, really. But before we get to that, massive thanks to ZCZ Films, who of course give us financial slaps on the back every now and again and help us do what we want to do. And we were just discussing off air what we were going to do with some of that money. So yeah, hopefully we've got some things that might improve or continue to improve the offering that we give you. But as always, thank you very much to them for their financial support. Right, so we're going to get into the recap against Port Vale, where we reached 15 games without a league win. So stay with us and we'll be back in just a moment with that.
Come rain or shine, it's time to relive the latest match action with the recap.
This podcast is sponsored by ZCZ Films, Reading's oldest ultras.
All right, Ross. I don't know why I'm laughing, really. Obviously, after the week that we had, where against all odds, we came out and we absolutely battered Millwall with a very young squad. Didn't act like they were young at all. They were very, very commanded by all accounts, and deservedly got the win, and really didn't let them have a sniff in midweek at the New Den. And then we travel up to Stoke-on-Trent, where it didn't quite work out, did it? And I know that you kind of watched the game. We all know what happened. We all know the kind of reactions on social media from the manager and the players, and everyone's disappointed with the result. Firstly, obviously making his debut was I nearly called him Jensen Button. How many times have I done that this week already?
That's a good one, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
Nevers. Yeah, David Button. Right. He made his debut. What did you think of him? On Saturday.
Honestly, didn't see that much of Button, especially not until the second half. The pitch over there in Port Vale was sort of interesting, and seemed to be causing Button a few issues. When he did have to make saves, he was parrying some of them out rather than catching them or stuff like that. Not very English goalkeeper of him, to use an old 90s phrase, but yeah, I thought he was all right. I didn't necessarily think that he was part of the major issue on Saturday. There are only a few players that I was really concerned with on Saturday, and Button wasn't one of them, basically. So, I mean, early on, Lumley was having some issues last season, and most of us came around on him, at least as a safe-ish pair of hands, if not an absolute showstopper, shot stopper. To use a phrase there, but yeah, I think Button was fine. It'll be different weeks whereby teams who are attacking more than Port Vale had the opportunity to do so are actually putting shots on him that will show us just how good he is and whether he's still got it. But he's not over the hill yet, so yeah, not too bad.
It's a good point about Lumley, and from last season, because he had almost a year ago, come up to a year ago. In fact, it might actually have been a year ago. That absolutely. Yeah. Shambles up at Rotherham, where he basically cost us the game.
Right.
And historically, we've not, certainly in my lifetime of watching Reading, we've never been massively enthusiastic about goalkeeper signings. I remember when Hanneman came, and Rochdale fans were like, "Oh, he's rubbish," and he's this and he's that, and obviously Fulham fans had a bit to say because he was there with them as well.
The two big goalkeeping, sorry, Ben, not to cut you off, but the two big goalkeeping, the two big goalkeepers for me as a Reading fan, the age I am, almost 30, have been, obviously Hanneman was there when I sort of started watching the club and a big deal, but really Federici and then McCarthy have been like the players for me that were goalkeepers that are storied in my head as like Reading goalkeepers, especially Federici. And they're players that came to us very young, or is McCarthy through the academy? Maybe. So, these are a lot of the goalkeepers that have come through have been ones that we've either grown ourselves or picked off from a very young age. And so I think that's part of why people are disappointed by Southwood moving on, because they thought that might be the next step in that. But yeah, I think you're right. Goalkeeping signings, it's been a very mixed bag for Reading in the past decade.
But I think you're right. I think we need to give him time, and this is where the split comes really in the fan base, because actually you can look at Saturday and you can really point to the team selection and say, well, hold on a second, the younger lads or the inexperienced lads, if you like, did so well in midweek. Why not at least make 2 or 3 changes to the team that we had against Peterborough? But obviously, as it is, only made 1 change, and that was Button coming in for Buzanis, who is in action right now, actually, as we speak, in the Premier League too. But in isolation, the result wasn't good, the performance wasn't good, and generally the defence was shambolic. And as using that word again, in isolation, you could probably just laugh that off and go, well, all right, it wasn't our day, fine. The problem is that this has happened consistently over and over again. And as I said at the top of the podcast, 15 games now without a league win. And, angry fingers are starting to be jabbed in the direction of certain players, rightly or wrongly, because they have been, part of a losing team. You look at Yeardom, it's pointless to not name them, Yeardom, Holmes, McIntyre, talk about Carroll in a minute, but certainly those guys as kind of older pros, it's not working, is it? What we'll come to kind of the week that we've got coming up in terms of 2 home games, but from your point of view, what changes for those? Let's deal with those 4 players to start with. What needs to happen with them right now, do you think?
It's a really tricky one. I do agree that so certainly with the centre backs, I'd like to see a little bit of rotation there soon, because we have built up a decent crop now. We're not just, watching Scott Dan from his wheelchair on the bench wander up and down and try and G the kids up. Harley Dean can still move. We have Tyler Binden, who showed he can still move. Not sure where Dorset has gone. Maybe he's not quite good enough yet. But we've also got Nelson Abbey, right, who played against Millwall the other day and at least showed the mental fortitude to deal with that and to be captain and everything. We've got enough players there that McIntyre and Holmes need a rocket stuck up their ass. I'm not actually super of the opinion that they're that bad. I think it starts elsewhere. I know that you've talked about bringing in a Brefa before for Yeardom, and that is something I'd kind of like to see. But I do also think that once this Sellers style starts clicking a bit more, Yeardom's going to be an important player. And I struggle to see him losing his place in the team, especially as a captain. I think, unfortunately, you have to look at Carroll. It seems to start there. I actually thought Reading started the game really, really well on Saturday. They played 15 minutes of really good football and should have been 1-0 up before the penalty even went in or was given, at least. And then
that was the problem. It didn't go in.
It didn't go in, yeah.
and someone said, on Twitter earlier, I was having a look through before we recorded, and on live, you know what I mean. And basically, he said, Carroll scores that penalty, we probably win 1-0. And actually, the mentality really of this team and going ahead, like we've rarely seen that, but when we have, I say this team, but the kind of the crop of players that we've got really as a bulk.
Yeah.
We probably would have been able to see that out. Port Vale having lost the previous week quite heavily, heads would drop. We'd probably be able to kick on and maybe get another one potentially. But that penalty miss was huge, and I want to talk a little bit about Carroll really, because from my point of view, I think he offered a little bit when he came in. And what really did for me, and I always look at players' characters and personalities and things like that. And there's been a lot of stuff recently with him in the papers over the last couple of months where he's kind of, not maybe done things wrong, but maybe not in the right way doing things potentially. And I don't know if that's a distraction, but the thing really that sealed it for me was when he left. He had the short-term deal with us to start with, and then he went off to West Brom. And that was like, for me, don't bring him back now. Like, what's the point of bringing him back if he's made the decision to go now? His head's been turned. He wants a different challenge, whatever. He thought maybe he could get back to the Premier League with West Brom at that point. Obviously, it didn't work out like that. And since he's come back for the second spell, it's been, I just want to say catastrophic, but like, it's not worked out, has it? And I think, better people than me in terms of analysing are starting to put two and two together a lot more and go, hold on a minute, it's actually detrimental to the way that we want to play. You look at Tuesday night against Millwall, the press was there, from the highlights I saw, the kind of dynamism of the players up front. We just don't get that with Carroll. And, for me, Saturday actually, I think, will serve as a positive, because that was probably a last chance saloon for a lot of those players. And, Sellers has been really clear. He wants players, he wants this, he wants that. And he's putting pressure on the club to get that done. And I think that's right. I really do. But for some of those players now, you look at it and thinking that you're pretty much done now. Like, you've either got to go, actually, do you know what? I'll play in a different position. Holmes at right back, for example, Tom Mack in centre midfield potentially. But it's just not working with Carroll, is it? I mean, I don't know how you kind of feel about him overall, not just on Saturday, but kind of moving forward. What do we do with him?
I always have to be careful with Carroll because my wife loves him, so I can't, get too critical of him. But I don't think she'll listen today, so maybe I can get away with it. She likes a man with long hair, which if you've seen me on Twitter, you can probably see. Yeah, that's
she's in with you. You're fine. That's good.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah, Carroll. It's not working out, is it? I think that he was brought in by Paul Ince again last year because he was a player that I think that Paul Ince was an old-fashioned football mind. He thought that having lads like that would be, the way to G everyone else in the changing room up and things like that. And Carroll certainly had some good moments with Reading, but he was signed for a style that was never going to work with Paul Ince. Like, people have been able to beat the long ball, lock it down game for years and years and years now. Like, that Paul Ince's style of football has died a long death. And then with Sellers, like you say, he's just not built for this style. And I do think that he's gotten his starts in the first couple of games because I think, Sellers doesn't want to come in and immediately ruffle feathers and cause issues with potentially one of the bigger players in the changing room. But he's 30 something years old. And the biggest issue for me is that he's always one silly move away from a red card. We go to Manchester United last year where he needs to, be on top of his game and really be like a coach on the field for the kids and things like that. And he gets himself sent off for two silly challenges, one of which he probably could have got sent off for, he got 2 yellows in that day very quickly and could have been sent off for the first one. So, again, he got himself close to being sent off this weekend. I'm just not really convinced that there's a whole lot to salvage there. And I think the opinion that I've come to is, if Sam Smith had been fit to start the season, would we have seen Carroll at all? I'm not.
That's a really good point. And do you know what, Ross? I think because Sam Smith hasn't featured and he's injured, a lot of people, me, have forgotten about him already. And I don't mean that as a kind of a negative, but actually, we did actually sign him. And getting Nibs and then Smith in, there's a really good reason for that because they know each other and the service and everything else. And I personally, I don't want to be sat here talking about players that we don't want to be playing. Like, I want to be okay. And I said this, we both said this at the start of the season when we're doing sort of previews and stuff, that we want to get behind our players, but we're at a point now where we have to win games. And, we'll talk about the next 2 games in a little bit, but they are really big games. And, someone said to me or mentioned on Twitter, oh, really, is it like the 3rd game or the 4th game of the season that big? Yeah, it is, because, you're looking at those teams and they're 2 home games that you'd look at and think, on paper, and I'm not doing a Tim Dale here, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to teams or anything else, but, Cheltenham and Stevenage, we're going to have to pick up points, whether that's, 4 or 6 or whatever. That's really vital. And the current crop of players that we've got, they are just not, they're perennial losers, basically. And that's not necessarily their fault, but they've just declined so much over the last few seasons. And it's difficult, but we've got to get players in that are going to be able to win us games. Last time we spoke, we were talking about the positives from a loss against Peterborough. Do you kind of wrapping up Saturday's game against Port Vale, do you see any positives in that performance at all, based on what you watched for 90 minutes on Saturday?
It's over now. So that would be the main one. Tricky. I was happy to see Wing get more minutes again, but like I said, I was really disappointed that the team just went off the boil after the penalty miss. So I would say the first 15 minutes relatively positive there, but yeah, I mean after that, I mean it is really difficult. I think that the first 15 minutes shows that the Seller style can work in this division. But where I'm interested right now is, was that drop off a mental thing with the penalty being missed? Was that drop off a physical thing? Because it's not an easy style of football to play for 90 minutes. I think that something that the team could do with learning is how to do this sort of thing in spurts, right? And how to sit a little bit tighter when they're not doing it. So, I mean, very quick point, but the way you see England playing tournaments these days is that they go absolutely wild for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then they just completely switch off for 30 minutes, and they just sit there and they just wait and they see what happens, and then they go ham again for 5 minutes at the end of the half, rinse and repeat in the second half. And you do that partially to control the match, but partially just to control your fitness as well, right? And I think that with a very intense style, like Sellers' style, I think we're going to have to learn how to put our foot on the ball and just stop basically for 20 minutes without conceding a lot of chances. So I think it can work. We just need to work out what it is that isn't working. Is it the mentality? Is it the fitness?
We said kind of, I can't remember which one it was, maybe 2-3 podcasts ago, that we anticipated that we would start slowly. Because Sellers basically wasn't in a job until halfway through pre-season anyway.
Yeah.
At which point he's kind of setting up a team that he thinks might be okay, but he's still trying to suss them out. If he'd had the 2 or 3 games prior, he probably would have been able to judge that a little bit more. Obviously the signs have been slow, but just to kind of end on the point that you made, I agree with you in the fact that actually just wait and see what happens, control the game a little bit, and kind of push that confidence. And what we saw on Saturday was a team that just hasn't got any confidence. You potentially get themselves in front, penalty, miss it, happens, move on. But then they showed nothing else on top of that. No attacking threat, no defensive solidity, nothing at all. And that's the frustration when you add that to the 14 games prior, where they haven't won in 2 leagues now across all those 2 seasons. Like,
doesn't matter.
It's getting frustrating. And the flip side of that is that on Tuesday, I'm looking at it now, he put out a team that was like, well, we've got nothing to lose here. We just go out, play our game, and the confidence is straight away. You go ahead in the first minute, and then you basically do that again pretty much straight after half time. Like, it's going to have an effect, right? It's going to have a positive effect. So that's really the key. And we're going to kind of dive into the mailbag now, because actually there's a lot of stuff around what do you do for tomorrow, Tuesday, or today if you're listening to this on Tuesday.
Yeah, if you're on your way.
Yeah, if you're on the way to the game, and then kind of Saturday as well. So we're going to jump into the mailbag now and kind of go through some of the things that you guys have been sending us, really.
Send in your views to the tilehurstend@gmail.com and have your say in the mailbag.
Right. Okay. Where do we start with this? I'm just going to go straight with it. Dex says, losing my voice already. Oh, by the way, if you heard a bang just like before we did the mailbag, I took the top off my bottle and the cat jumped up on the table on the floor. So the house hasn't fallen apart. It's just a cat being a cat, basically.
Okay.
Dex, sorry to interrupt you, Dex. Was Millwall a freak incident that got our hopes up? If we can't get another striker in, what are our realistic options to actually score any goals? Shoot, Ross.
No, it's not. The Millwall result for me is more. I actually think the Millwall result is a better canary in the coal mine than the Port Vale result. Now, I will caveat that with I actually got the pleasure of listening to the Millwall commentators through most of that game the other day, and they were obviously losing their minds, not super happy. And some of them were saying that a lot of the players looked disinterested, but they still put out, almost their first team against our kids. So I mean, they can't have been that. I mean, like they may have been disinterested, I guess, but still, like even when you're disinterested, you don't forget how to play football. So there's a lot of good players there that were handily beaten, and I do think that that result is actually the one that's more indicative of where we're going under Sellers. I'm still feeling pretty positive about things. I think that the result on Saturday was more about mental, or mentality issues, especially with Carroll once his head dropped. And I think it's difficult when like you've got a bunch of attackers. It's Carroll and the kids, right? You've got a bunch of attackers and midfielders, other than Hutchinson, under the age of what, like 25, and then they see their big man up top, Carroll, throwing his toys out of the pram after he can't get a header or a penalty like put away, right? Like if I see Carroll going down and complaining under one more light challenge from a center back who's a foot shorter than him, I'm just going to lose it, because it's not what our newer players need to see. It's not what our younger players need to see. And I do think that the issues kind of started there on Saturday. So I think that Sellers, the game against Millwall showed what his style can do to teams who aren't expecting it. And yeah, I'm still more positive than negative at the moment. I'd like to have some points in League One, but I don't see us not getting off the mark this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in terms of striking options, and going back to the point about Sam Smith, signed for a specific reason to score goals. I think he will be successful this time around. I really do. I think he's done enough in League One to be able to kick on with us now.
Mm-hmm.
And to be blunt, again, not being disrespectful to Cambridge at all, but we've probably got a better quality of player than they have overall. But we've actually got to show that as a club now, and certainly on Tuesday night, those players did that. I'm looking at them, Nelson Abbey, Carson, who obviously made his debut on Saturday in terms of league debut anyway, Kamara, who really has faded into the background but got on the score sheet and was really badly treated by Paul Ince, I think.
Oh yeah.
Interestingly, Rashish is playing tonight, so it would mean that he's not, probably going to be in the squad for tomorrow, which I think is an interesting one. Obviously Nib's got more minutes on his belt, so there are positives there. And I would agree with you. I don't think it is a freak, but the longer this kind of winless streak goes on, and I'm not just talking about the 2 games this season, I'm talking about the 13 last season since we last won a game. It's going to be difficult. So I don't think it's a freak, but as we said, and as I said earlier, we knew we were going to be on a slow start, really. Alex Everson. Oh, we know we're doing well when a rival podcast chips in with a question, Ross. We know we're flying. No, but I appreciate your question, Alex. Thank you. He says, and this is a real tough one. You are Ruben Sellers. Can only make one change before Tuesday night. Who is it?
Oh, it's Carroll out, Vickers in all day. I'm ready to see Vickers. For me, the consistent thing in the last 20 minutes where we did pick it up again against Peterborough, and most of what I saw of the game against Millwall is, like there are a lot of players played really well and showed something, but in terms of dynamism and attacking intent, Vickers is really the one who seems to be doing the most right now. I mean, he's certainly going to lose the ball occasionally, but if you lose the ball in the opposition's box, I'm not that worried about that. Like it means you're trying something. Yeah, Vickers for Carroll.
I think Alex said in his own podcast, or alluded to it anyway, that he's expecting all kind of, he said his heart wants 8 changes, but his head says 3. And I think Sellers is in a difficult situation now, because if he goes wholesale changes, he's going to lose those players, full stop. Now, whether or not that's a good or bad thing is irrelevant, because actually last thing you want now is a toxic relationship between players that aren't playing and the coaching staff. But based on the performance on Saturday, that none of those players really could have an argument to be pushed with, especially as most of those players, apart from Button, played against Peterborough and didn't really do the job either. So there will be changes, and I think for me it's more interesting to see what happens on the team sheet than it does in potentially the performance and result. Of course we need to win, of course we desperately want that as a club, but actually where you said in terms of the Millwall result not being a freak, like the players that he chooses to play against Cheltenham tomorrow night, is going to be really, really telling. So that's we kind of watch this space. But again, without trying to copy you all the time, I'd say Carroll's got to come out. 100% has to come out. Loyal Royal, this is kind of more of a statement, really. We're still start again. We are still rebuilding. No need to what am I doing?
Oh my gosh.
I'm having a right there. I'll start again. We are still rebuilding. No need to panic yet. I'm not panicking. I promise you. I just can't speak. The Sell Before We Die campaign is there for a reason. There's no easy way through this. The younger players have to be protected, but yes, we could have a more experienced younger team by the end of the season, building towards next. I kind of agree with the sentiment, but we have to have a fairly good season this season because everything's going to go quite south, basically. I can't think of the words shock. But, if this season isn't positive, then the wheels are really going to completely come off and the windows and the doors and everything else. If we get to kind of
we need to win more games than we lose this season. We need to get out of this losing mentality, like you're saying, right? Like I think that I don't necessarily agree with the idea that certainly McIntyre and Holmes are. I mean, they're perennial losers in just the facts, right? They have lost a lot of games of football, but there's a reason why Tom McIntyre is being looked at by Blackburn today. They're not bad footballers. They're footballers who, when they start to lose, their heads go down because the guy up top and Tom Ince last year yelling at them, and Danny Drinkwater the year before yelling at them, and all of these ex-pros just suddenly let their heads drop and decide to, and I'm calling them ex-pros for a reason, let their heads drop, and they become the mental issue on the field. I remember Tom Ince screaming at whoever would listen, basically, throughout the second half of last season, even when he was having a stinker. So,
and to be fair, who was he shouting at? Tom Holmes, and he handled himself fantastically at that point, because I would have just gone up and slapped him, to be honest. Kind of David Batty, Kieran Dyer style. I know Lee Barry and Kieran Dyer at Newcastle a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah,
more than a couple of years ago. That's just showing my age, but yeah, you're right that there has been, whether or not it's one individual or not, but there's been a group consistently over the last 3 or 4 seasons that have kind of poisoned the well a little bit. And that's not helped these players. But yeah, I mean, we do have to agree that we're going to have to move on, but we are going to have to be in a situation where we're doing the best we can to move forward, really. Dan Highmarsh says, it seems like a lot of our fan base expect to win no points in any games this season and believe this is what we should expect. What do you think we should expect from this season? I don't expect to be competing with Pompey, Derby, etc., but beating the likes of Port Vale, Cheltenham. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because our expectations are so low at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of summed it up perfectly when you said we've got to win more games than we lose this season, which would buck the trend of the last 2 seasons. I think stripping it down to individual teams is problematic, because actually, we've always been honest. We're not League One experts. We haven't been in this division for 20 years, and in that time, the quality's moved on a lot. Someone was to say to me before Saturday, how do you think you do against Port Vale? I don't know. I actually expected us to lose, because without using the phrase, it's typical Reading in terms of actually not getting a foothold in the game early on, and then confidence dropping, and then they get a lucky goal, which it was really. It was a bit of a fluky goal. I mean, where are you at with expectations generally for the season? Not moving away from individual teams. What are you happy with this season, Ross?
What am I happy with this season? I'm definitely happy with, like I say, I feel that the Millwall result was a sense of where we're going with this style. If we can bring in a lot of players into the first team that are a bit more selfless and a bit more willing to keep going, always play like the score is 0-0. I think that August is not the correct month to be assessing things in. I really feel that Augusts throw up all kinds of weird results all the time. Blackburn hadn't lost. I don't think Blackburn lost in August last season. A couple of years ago, we had that run under Paunovic where we won like 6 in a row and then just slowly died a death as the season went on. Just a year ago, I was writing an article about how we'd had a terrible start, and then we picked up after that for a little while and got ourselves into a position whereby we were at least challenging to stay up last season, although not, ultimately successfully, of course. I'm just not that worried about things in August when I see green shoots and I see issues coming from individuals rather than team performances. I do think that the performance of like the whole team in general wasn't good enough in the last 70 minutes, but I think it was almost like a reversion to the sort of Hollins era of Reading. So I'm just really not that concerned right now. I do think that expectations for this season being, not quite the playoffs remain about right. We really could have scored 2 or 3 in the first 15 minutes against Port Vale, and we're going to do that against other teams this season, and we're going to score those chances. So I'm still not panicking just yet. I'm not going to panic in August because you just, when you're in the pits in Lancashire in November or February or whatever, you just don't remember these nice sunny days where you're watching teams play. But yeah, obviously it'll be nice to get some points on the board soon.
It's a really good question, and I think expectations vary from individual to individual. For me, I want to see a team compete and kind of go out and be able to exert a game plan, and for us to go, okay, we know what to expect from this team. We know, talking about us, not other teams, but we know the style of play. We know we can see what we're trying to do. The green shoots, and there was some of that against Peterborough. And I think the main frustration for Port Vale, not just for me but generally, is that the other team or the youth team or the younger kids did so well in midweek. Had they gone out and lost 5-0, and then we lost to Port Vale, it would be like, okay, well, we've literally got nothing. But I think a lot of the frustration on Saturday came from the fact there wasn't a mix-up of players. There wasn't a kind of, well, hold on, you did really well, so you earned the shirt to play in the league on Saturday. But also, there is a hope in that team. And because they're younger, because they haven't been around the first team where it's just been constant loss after loss after loss, there are positives there that probably fans want to see more regularly and can kind of get behind a little bit more. And that's where the frustration, if Vickers plays 5 games and he doesn't score, no one's going to go, oh my God, get him out. Whereas, with the rep that Carroll has, if he's doing that and being petulant, as you say, people are going to lose their heads. And rightly so, because as you've said, you look at those players to be, that kind of beacons of light without, being Lord of the Rings about it, but kind of really pushing on. And you're thinking about Lord of the Rings now, aren't you?
I'm thinking about Lord of the Rings now, yeah.
You just looked out, I saw you just look out, and I was like, no, concentrate on this. We're talking about
the beacons of Tyneside have been lit, Andy Carroll.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. But it is a good question. And I think, the minute we start picking up wins, it will look very, very different. Obviously, the off-field problems will remain, but actually, all we want to see as a fan base is for a team to go out and compete and at least trying to pick up points. And as you said, for the last 70 minutes against Port Vale, that just didn't look likely, and that's the frustration, I think. Sam Richards says, dreadful performance, but what was even worse was the booing directed at Tom Holmes from a section of fans. Why does this happen to an academy player clearly struggling with form and confidence? We'll never understand it. Difficult one, Sam. As we said, we've always had players that have become scapegoats. It's just that this season it's happened a lot quicker, really. I think he's part of a group, as we said at the start, being looked at by fans. I think, he's lost form, and in any other team, he probably would have been taken out if there was an adequate replacement. Last season would have been a classic example of that. If there was someone else to come in and play in his place, that would have happened. But there wasn't, so we had to keep going, and progressively got worse and worse and worse, to be blunt. Booing your own players. I wasn't there. I wasn't there on Saturday, so I don't know what the away end was like or what was said, but it's an emotional game, and I think had that been, as I said, the game in isolation, then we probably wouldn't have had that. But the fact that it's been not just 15 games without a win, but the last 2 or 3 seasons, everything else that's going on, frustration is starting to boil over a little bit. So it's difficult, and I think it, again, having academy players. We've had great academy players. Am I allowed to talk about Gilfie now? I don't know, but he was the best player I've ever seen playing a Reading shirt. As an academy player that came through, absolutely stunning player. But it doesn't change the fact that the expectations are still the same. Yeah. Whether they're academy players or they're signings, you just want them to succeed and do well. So I think we probably need to move away from they're one of our own academy players and all this sort of stuff, because it doesn't. I don't think it helps them as professionals. I really don't. And there's this kind of romantic narrative that actually we should like them more. They should all be judged the same. But in my opinion, they should.
Yeah, I would never. I'm not one to boo your own players personally for anything. I think that, especially within the 90, you need to stay supportive. Like anything that could like set someone's head off within the 90 when you need them to be watching the striker on the other team, like don't do it. Don't engage. You're not helping. But with Holmes, I think that at this point, what's going on is, we've brought in Harley Dean and we've got these other options in Bindon and Abbey, like I was saying earlier. And I think that now what Holmes would probably benefit from is a 10-game absence from the team or something like that, just to give him a little bit of a chance to reset his head, just focus on his football again, not worry about being vice captain or whatever. I think that what he provides in that back line is more easily replicable by the options that we have on the bench, whereas Tom McIntyre, while his defensive work isn't always the greatest, if you took Tom McIntyre out of that back line, our ability to move the ball around quickly at the back and our ability to build from the back would very quickly diminish. Like I was saying earlier, there are reasons he's still getting offers from the Championship. It's because players who can defend and hold a line are a dime a dozen in the English leagues. Players who can actually pass and bring it out from the back are rare, and they are players that you need to cover in a back line, but they are players that can bring a lot to your attacking movement. So yeah, for Holmes, maybe a break now wouldn't be the worst idea.
On McIntyre, I was talking to I talked to him fairly regularly, but I was talking to him last season, and he said he's a coach at the club still there, very, very experienced, and he said that Tom McIntyre was one of the best players that he's ever coached. Now, there's no reason to say that unless you actually mean it, bear in mind the amount of players that he has coached, and he's coached players that are now playing in sort of European football and stuff like that. So I don't know. They just need a break, and coming out of the team, I think, would probably do them good at the moment. But we just need to be able to have the players to come in and fill those gaps and do better than they've been doing, really. Right, Math's really gone for it. He's basically just pinged off a load of brain nuggets, which I'll just read and then we can kind of pick them apart. And I don't think he'll be massively offended if we don't answer them all. But anyway, whatever. We'll do what we can. So when someone says, okay, a few things, it's more than a few things, but we'll give it a go. Number one, he's numbered them. Given the team from the last game ago versus sticking with the team from Millwall, it didn't work, but was it logical to do that? Number two, how should the manager go from here? Do we expect to see gradual or wholesale changes going forward? We've sort of covered the Millwall Port Vale team hybrid mishmash, really. As I said, I think they won the last chance to play in some of those players, and I think he needed one more game to kind of look at it and go, okay, this is it. Like, you've got to go up there and do it against a team that were pretty low on confidence, and they didn't. So I think we will see some changes. Ross, gradual or wholesale changes?
I would say, I was going to answer this gradual, but I'm actually going to say wholesale changes of some of the senior groups. So if we went into Cheltenham tomorrow with no Carroll, no Yiadom, T-Mac or Holmes, and that's saying that having just defended McIntyre, I really like that kind of player. I actually think that removing those four for Cheltenham might be a good idea. I think that it's clear that Sellers has been willing to give the long-term players a chance to, be in their roles again. But I also think that he needs to, as I've said once in this podcast, stick a rocket under some players' asses and say, look, you have competition now. I am going to play these other players if you don't give me something in training, if you don't give me something in the game on a Saturday, and if you can't keep your head after, a penalty missed, not even a goal against, then we're not going to be able to proceed. So I think that while in general the change is going to be gradual, I wouldn't mind seeing a wholesale change out of some of the senior players to really make a point to them.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what team he goes with. I don't think I've been as intrigued of starting 11 than I have as tomorrow night. So we'll see how we go with that. We're still technically under embargo for this window, then the two after, appealed in the last one, apparently. Owner has set them up all to fail by not paying HMRC. Assume the loan fee would be why we missed out on Jensen Weir. This remains pre-season, but how much is it hurting us? Hurting is a strong word. I think it's...
August.
Well, yeah, like he's still finding his feet with the players that he's got and who he can trust and who he can't trust. And you know, the problem is the games are coming. Well, it's not really a problem actually. The games are coming thick and fast, but the longer we don't get a win, the longer the kind of stress is and the toxicity is going to build. What's the matter with me this evening? What is going on?
You handled that well. You don't.
Yeah,
I'm
trying to get more words into my lexicon.
There we there. Perfect.
There you go. But yeah, like it's not easy, right? And once he knows who he can trust and who his team actually is, we are going to see results pick up. You know, we're not going to win every game, of course we're not. But what we don't want to be is so far down the table that we're constantly going, okay, we're literally scrapping for points now. What he wants to be kind of organic, if there is such a thing, and actually trying to be able to do that sooner rather than later is a challenge. And it's not easy, and we know that. But he's stuck around. He's ended up at the Purple Turtle, like he's talking to fans, like he's being honest. He's taking people on in interviews, and I've been impressed with him so far. Whether or not he's good long term, I have absolutely no idea anymore. I don't know what a good manager is, to be honest. But I really hope that he comes good and is able to turn this around. Math goes on to ask how much more and what positions do you think we need? We've kind of covered this a lot, haven't we? Again, Ross, by Saturday, what would you like to see happen in the transfer market?
I think we need a left back. I'm not convinced by Nesta Guinness-Walker. So if there's one big thing that I would like to see come in this week, it's a left back. I think all of us wouldn't mind seeing another striker come in, but with Sam Smith coming back in a few months' time, that at least gives us something to prepare for. And the performances of Vickers so far give us something to work with at the moment. So for me, if there's one position that I could maybe replace for Saturday, it would be left back. I think that's actually pretty harsh on Guinness-Walker. He won the penalty on Saturday and he has provided some attacking spark. But I feel that he struggles to do both for long periods in a game. So he'll kind of attack for 20 minutes, play well, but shirk his defensive responsibilities, get wrangled in by his defense, and then go completely missing on the attacking side. So I think the Nesta Guinness-Walker is a pretty decent player when he's only has to do one thing at once, and that's just not how this team is going to operate with their fullbacks. So I think I'd like to see a more reliable left back come in.
There's a couple of rumours that came out today, fresh rumours if you like. We've inquired about a centre back from Swansea, and there is also talk of a striker from Copenhagen whose name I literally cannot remember. I know his first name is Paul, but I can't remember his surname. I don't know. But anyway, he's got previous with Sellers because Sellers was his assistant manager when he was at Copenhagen. So there's history there that he might go, okay, well, I know him, get him in. But I would go striker. Final one from Math. It's literally been about 4 years getting through these, but we're nearly there. How optimistic are you that things will click? We seem to see what Sellers wants to do early doors, either the fitness or mentality, heads go down. Confident that we'll overcome them as the season goes on, or is it too much of a squad that's used to losing? What needs to change? Results, basically. And I think they will come, but whether or not they're soon enough to be able to see us comfortably in the top half of the table, I don't know. And I hope, that we have some consistency in the dugout and that he sees it through and he's able to implement what he wants. I think the last thing we really need, and I don't think anyone's really, well, I hope they're not, I don't know, people getting on the manager's back, but we've got to give him time to correct the mess that we've been in. Yeah. So I'm pretty optimistic that things will change. The time frame for that, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Ross?
I think he nailed it. I was talking about it earlier, and we talked about fitness and mentality, and one of those things was at fault for the loss to Port Vale. I'm not 100% sure which one it is yet. I have a feeling that mentality is a little more involved, but obviously, again, it's August, so fitness on the squad is going to be a little limited at the moment. Lewis Wing is about as fast as the Statue of Liberty right now, so. Like players are going to improve physically. I think that this team could really be clicking nicely in, say, November, when you've had a few months to get rolling. The weather's a bit cooler. Like you're deeper into the season. I'm not super concerned at this time. I do think that things are going to come together. Like I say, my expectation and hope for this season is more wins than losses, and I do still think we'll do that personally. Yeah, they're a rough, starts to the season for everyone. Nottingham Forest had a really rough start to the season and then got promoted a couple of years ago. So keep forgetting what league we're in now, right? But
League One, I think.
League One, yeah, something like that.
That's the rule anyway.
Oh yeah, that's what I've heard. I don't really understand what a Port Vale is, but I understand that was a league game, not the Carabao Cup this weekend. So
the Sky Sports app, I guess a lot of people use it, but for scores and stuff. I was looking at it on Saturday and I was like, where the hell's our game? And then I realised that I hadn't set the like preferred league, like the league you follow or whatever, to be League One rather than Championship. And I was like, this is so sad.
Yeah.
So I did it again, and I'm all right now. I'm all good. But yeah, it's one of those. Final question, and then I've got a kind of a statement for you to wrap it all up. Pip Sharman, a first aid fan. She was the one, people remember, she was the one who saved the Luton fan's life last season, which was fantastic. And they were reunited towards the end of the season when we played Luton at home, which was great. Pip says, would you rather fight one lion-sized snapping turtle or 100 snapping turtle-sized lions? Do they have snapping turtles in Maine? Have you got those?
Yes.
Around?
Yes, and let me tell you, you want nothing to do with them. Okay,
it's historic monsters.
100 turtle-sized lions all the way. The first time I was ever, Maine is a land of lakes, and so we spend a lot of our time in the summer, diving into various lakes and rivers and things like that. And there's nothing that'll make me clear quicker than someone going, "Oh my gosh, a snapping turtle!" Because those things, suddenly you get in the water with one of those, and you're the turtle. You can't move quickly. Yeah. So it's those are spooky guys, especially when you're only wearing a pair of Speedos.
Or a massive alligator, like depicted in the film Lake Placid, starring Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah, luckily, I haven't seen too many alligators, but I did see a bear last week, and I've seen a mountain lion in this part of town as well before.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's wicked.
You do get some interesting things up here.
I would, 100%. I'd take the 100 snapping turtle-sized lions because you can tame them, right? You can tame a lot. I mean, 100's a bit of a stretch.
Think about the width of the shell on that large snapping turtle. I don't want anything to do with that.
Nah, not doing that. Not doing that at all. Good question, Pip. Thank you. And then a final, it's kind of a statement, really. Sasha Lydiard says, we need to pull together rather than turn against the players on the first away game. It's up to fan podcasts to show a balanced view, unlike the shocking display by the local radio station and some of our fans. Over to you, TTE. Well, it's a game of opinions, isn't it, Sasha? I guess on that local radio, did I think it was far too harsh? Yeah, I thought it was well over the top personally, and I think, on reflection, Tim might look at that and go, I was probably a little bit frustrated from the previous season and maybe criticism of what he did or didn't do with Paul Ince. I don't know. Only Tim can answer that. All we can do on this podcast is kind of call it as we see it. And if people like that, great. If people don't like it, you're blessed with a lot of other Reading podcasts, to be honest. There's some good ones out there. So it's difficult. We are of the opinion, myself and Ross, that things will change. When that is, we don't know. But hopefully we've tried to be balanced anyway, Sasha. But it's tough. It's tough going when you've had the kind of the last few seasons that we've had, and I get it from younger fans' point of view who don't remember what this club was like. I think that's particularly difficult for those chaps and ladies. So it's tough. And I think, as Ross said last week, Twitter doesn't tend to be the best barometer for opinions and people being level-headed, particularly after the game. So the beauty of us recording on a Monday is that we get 48 hours to get it out of our system and then try and be as objective as possible. So yeah. Right, we're going to move into double preview actually this week, Ross. So stay with us and we'll be right back after this very short message.
There's another huge game ahead for the Royals, so be loud and be proud for the big match preview.
Right, Cheltenham, always associated with racing. Great day out if you like horse racing. Just down the road, technically, nice little part of the world. We played them 4 times in our history, Ross, and they've all been in the cup, and we've never lost to them. Do you think that means anything in this day and age?
I feel like every fan base has got like the typical Reading sort of statement, right? Typical Barnsley, typical Cheltenham, or whatever. But I mean, like, having just heard that stat now from you, typical Reading would dictate that we'll give them their first victory against the Royals on Tuesday. I know very little about Cheltenham. Is this where Luke Southwood is playing these days? I believe, maybe.
Yes, yeah, he is.
All right, so we know that we can get some goals, if we. Oh gosh, well, here's the issue, right? We've been talking about getting rid of Carroll all this time, and then you think about the fact that we're going to have a 5'2" goalkeeper against us on Tuesday, and you might think that we want some crosses into the box again. But I think that regardless, I just want to see us. I want to see us at least put some points on the board, but Cheltenham have also had a bad start to the season. They're below us. And so I really feel like, it would just do the fan base a world of good to get a win and get out ahead of it there.
Well, they're one of 6 teams who have not yet won. Northampton, us, Cheltenham, Burton, Leyton Orient and Wickham. All down the bottom there at the moment without any points on the board whatsoever. This is as good as opportunity as it gets, right? Surely, in terms of the season, and we've had seasons where we've not won for a long period of time and had very slow starts. Thinking under Brendan Rodgers, which was very, very turgid at times and desperate. Really, he was kind of on a rebuild job, and it didn't quite work out for him. But in terms of where we're at now, that's. On paper, Tuesday night, probably quite a low crowd. That's probably quite a good game to get your first few points on. They've got quite a few injuries, so they're not looking at a first team picture at all at the moment for the Robins. But we also do have Stevenage on Saturday, which again is going to be an interesting game because they have started very well. They've got 2 wins out of 2. And at the moment, before games played this midweek, sit 3rd in the league and have, of course, got the Man Mountain Steve Evans. And if you wanna have a little laugh, Google Steve Evans, go to images, and there should be a picture of him on there somewhere, kind of standing outside his cottage with a wooden gate, and he's got like a little, I think it's like a Scottish Terrier under his arm. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So enjoy that. But they've come up last season and they've started really well. Really, really well. So these are not, in theory, they should be okay. But, we've seen how the season's already panned out. Probably take the Peterborough game out the window. Saturday was not good. This is a really good opportunity, right, Ross, to get some points on the board in these games.
I think Cheltenham certainly is. I think Stevenage could be tricky. This is a great example, again, of how winning or losing can define your mentality, or winning or losing over a consistent period of time, can define your mentality. Stevenage won a ton of games last season, and they've come into the league and they've continued winning. It's a mentality whereby when you're not winning, you feel the urge constantly to be getting forward, to be pushing. Whereas when you're losing all the time, I think that you become a little bit more numb to being frustrated by it. You might not be going into challenges or whatever as hard as you should. You might not be playing that ball quick enough. And so I think having us, especially if we don't win tomorrow against Cheltenham, play against a team that is in a winning streak, I actually think it's going to be pretty difficult for us to get a result against Stevenage, just because we're going to be coming at this from completely different angles. So get a win against Cheltenham, and I can see us winning both of them. Struggle to win against Cheltenham, and then you worry.
I was literally about to say, it's like we're on some sort of telepathic link or whatever.
Right.
Honestly, if we win tomorrow night against Cheltenham, I think we're going to win on Saturday as well. But again, as you said, we don't, and Saturday becomes really difficult. Not just from a performance point of view, but also from a kind of like the crowd and everything else, and the pressure starts to build. And we're five games in total into the season by then, and we could be looking at one win in the cup, and that's just not good enough, is it really? So yeah, I think we will win tomorrow night, and I think we will then go on to win on Saturday. I think it's time. I think there will be a bit of a shake-up. I think those players will come in and do well because they want to stay in the team and so on. And I think we will add a few more players between now and Saturday as well. And I know I've said this literally every week that we've been on the podcast and kind of going from Tuesday to Saturday and so on. But I think this is the week we see some players before we don't pay the tax in 8 days' time. We're under another embargo. So, yeah, it's just a constant merry-go-round, isn't it? Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Let's hope for 6 points this week. Ross, look after yourself and don't get involved in any snapping turtle business.
Thank you. I'll be avoiding the lakes. No, I think it's going to rain the rest of this week. So I won't get myself submerged.
Good. And we will see you next week, or chat to you next week. We were going to talk a little bit about the ownership issue this week, but we felt we had so much to discuss with all your fantastic questions that we will do that at some point, and we'll do it the justice that it needs. But there was quite a lot of stuff to get through this week, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. Have a really good week. Hopefully by this time next week we're talking about 6 points and we're further up the table than we are now. Look after yourselves. Come on, Reading.
You smile.